walked up to a kid years ago at our church. He had drawn something. I think it was pencil drawing, maybe paint. And I walked over to him and I just said, "You're an artist." Later on, he comes back to me a few years later. He says, "You have no idea what that sparked in me. Someone noticed me and called that out and appreciated what I did, affirmed it." I'm looking around, and as you speak into them, listen to them and their story, and you let them share, like, "Oh yeah, I love to play the piano at home. I only know 6 chords." And you find out about their life and you see God on them. You just invite them in.
Yeah.
And it's just been that kind of a road.
The Ferment.
You're listening to the Ferment podcast, conversations about worship and transformation. Today's guest is Terry Butler. Terry is a veteran Vineyard songwriter and the worship pastor of the Vineyard Community Church in Pomona, California. Terry is best known for his songs Cried My Heart, At the Cross, Psalm 19, and the 2019 Vineyard Worship single, All the Same.
This episode is brought to you by our friends at worshipteam.com. Worshipteam.com comes preloaded with over 12,000 songs, with new songs being added all the time. Hillsong, Bethel, Vineyard, Six Steps, Jesus Culture, just to name a few. Service building with Worship Team is a snap, and all the songs are completely legal and licensed. You can also find them on social media: Facebook at worshipteam.com, Twitter at worshipteam, Instagram at worshipteam_WT. Visit them at worshipteam.com for a free trial today. Complete worship planning with thousands of songs, easy interface, mobile apps, and legal rights for your church. All you need in one place, worshipteam.com.
All right, what up, everybody? Adam here. You're listening to the Ferment podcast. And today I have a super special guest with me. Terry Butler is in the house.
I love being here.
That's right. Terry, so glad that we're having this conversation. You're one of the living legends, one of the patriarchs of Vineyard Worship.
What are you saying? I'm old?
I'm not saying that. I'm trying to say something really kind,
I know,
Terry.
and I'm just giving you a hard time.
Oh, man. Well, thanks for being here, and thanks for having a little conversation with me. Here's kind of what I want to do. I want to do what we always do, and I just want to start with some personal history. Could you just tell everybody where you grew up and how you grew up, and did you come from a family of faith?
Yeah, I grew up in the Midwest, and my first 9 years in Michigan, born in Michigan near Detroit. My father was a pastor all of his life, he and my mom, and so we moved around in Michigan some, 3 different churches where I was old enough to remember those. And then we moved to Ohio for 4 years near it was Canton, Ohio. And we grew up in a traditional denomination.
Yeah.
Not a whole lot of stuff about the Holy Spirit going on. But my father and my mother never bought the line, where, like the gifts aren't still operable, all those kind. They never bought into all that, and they were always forward thinking about worship and stuff. So us kids, a whole bunch of us, 6 kids, that was legacy handed to us. So we never had to fight through some of that stuff, that happens to PKs and other kids. It was always, we want to bless what you're doing. So we moved to California in '69, and what a year to move to California.
Yeah.
So much going on, but we were brought right into the whole thing of the Jesus movement. We just dropped right in. My brother and I started writing music. We were in a band for 10 years.
Yeah.
Christian band, saw hundreds of kids saved.
Yeah, so you were right in the whole swing of the Jesus People deal.
Yeah.
So why did your family move to California? Ministry?
Yeah.
Yeah, so your dad took a church?
Took a church.
Yeah.
And people told, literally, you listeners are going to love this. People from the church we left came up to my parents and said, "You're taking your kids to California, they're going to go to hell."
Yeah.
They thought, that's it.
So the California myth of bad things are in California, it's not recent, right?
No.
Yeah, it's something that's a bit of a historic legacy.
It is.
Yeah, so you guys came to California and you're right in the middle of this whole Jesus People thing. Mm-hmm. And you said you and your brother got in a band and started writing songs. Was it like it wouldn't have been was it worship? I mean, it wouldn't have been worship.
No.
What was it? Just
Very, very much message songs.
Yeah.
And, like just telling our story, they're testimonials type songs. We did 3 albums. We actually had a label sign us in Nashville. We were, of course, we're out in California.
What were
we
you
did
guys
a little
called?
bit of touring. One Truth.
One Truth.
And, it was, these are relationships that are so dear. Now, you know who Bill Dragoo is, the legendary drummer in the Vineyard?
Yeah, that's
Bill,
right. I do.
He was in that band.
I think when
One
we
Truth.
came to lead worship at your church back a few years ago, Bill was with us.
Bill was
wasn't
there.
he? Yeah. Okay.
And so that we were a family. The band was a family as well, and all the kids, all of our kids are still in each other's lives. It was an amazing journey. And then what happened was Randy and I, God would drop a worship song on us, and we knew it was kind of like other. We were like, did you feel that? It was like, What is that? Like, that's not this testimonial thing, although that was fine. And so he would drop it in. We noticed on our 3 records, on the free albums, they were those albums, like they had, you could read the notes. It was pretty big album thing. But we had 8 tracks too, guys. And then the cassettes, of course. and oh my gosh, So anyway, he would drop that on us. And we noticed much later on that each of those 3 albums, there was a worship song on that album. It was kind of a sign.
It was just in your heart.
It was.
It was in your heart.
Yeah, it was.
So when you guys were going out and doing these things, and it's Jesus People Days, were you preaching?
Yeah, it was one of those things where, especially my brother Randy would be the speaker.
Okay.
I would as well sometimes, but oh my gosh, here's the joke about the Jesus movement. And we said one time, it seemed like in that era, so many kids were flocking to Christ, that you could sing as the invitational song. You could have sung "Mary Had a Little Lamb," and people would have come to the front. It was amazing. So Randy would share 15 minutes, and they would flood up to the front.
Yeah, my spiritual father, Ray Hombach, who was my pastor, he's still my pastor, you know?
Sure.
And he sort of met Jesus in some of those days as well. And he always tells me that it was fairly common. People could just stand up in the middle of the cafeteria at school and be like, someone here needs to know Jesus. Who wants to get saved? And someone would respond.
Amazing.
Yeah. What a time.
Let me tell you one last little tidbit. My brother, our youth group, our church had about like 100 adults. Our youth group was like 60 to 80 kids at a time. Craziness, just awesome. We had 2 Bible studies going on Friday nights because we couldn't fit the kids all in one. The kids in our youth group, they would call Randy and say, Randy, over at Alhambra High School, there are 2 kids that want to receive Christ, and they want to know if you can make an appointment with them. Can you go over there? It was just
beautiful.
Like, it was so awesome.
Beautiful. What a time to be alive and just be used by God. Okay, so I want to go back maybe earlier in your story again, and I want to pick up this music thing because when I think of you, and when I think of your brother in particular, I think of you guys as musicians and songwriters, and I just want to know, when did you start playing music, and how did that happen? Were your parents musicians?
Yes, my father was actually a very good baritone, and there was people are going to go, who's that? You could look it up. There was something called the Fred Waring Singers, and they were like Pennsylvania, and they made record. They were known. My father tried out, and he almost joined them, but the Lord said, I've got you. I've got other plans. So a great singer. He would be a song leader, they would call it, not a worship leader, song leader in camp meetings all over. But then, God said, you're a senior pastor. So he moved. So my mom played piano all those years alongside of Dad. It's kind of that thing, where the dad preaches and the pastor preaches, his wife plays. And so I was around it. And it goes all the way up the tree in our family. It goes up to grandparents, et cetera, that were musical. So my mom tells me that I would go to the piano in the sanctuary of the church and just start beating, just playing notes. But she started noticing that I would start making melodies. So it's not like like my grandson who just likes to bang on the keys. Right. And so it started there. And Randy came a little bit later. Yeah. But a story from when we were in Ohio, and I was, like I said, I was like 10 or 11. Randy was 8 or 9, and we would listen to commercials on the radio, and then we'd listen to the Beatles. That was, everything's Beatles. Our older brother would buy every album. We'd go and sit at the piano and figure out the song together. And so we'd be playing the song, and then Randy says, and it's true, Terry got tired of, he's saying me, Terry got tired of me playing with him, so I just would shove him off of the bench. Yeah. Literally, because like Randy, the piano is mine.
Yes.
That's when he got his first guitar, which was a plastic guitar bought with the stamps. You put them in the book. You collect stamps from the gas station. Yeah, the blue.
Yeah. I think I remember as a kid, even there was some grocery store stamp thing kind of like this.
That's it. So he filled it up. Horrible guitar, but that was Randy's start.
Beautiful.
So he was mad at me for throwing him off the bench, but then he thanked me later for getting him into the guitar. So that's
you guys were just around it, and you sort of picked it up osmotically. Your mother played.
We did.
Yeah. So when you were playing music, were you just sort of in love with music, or did you have a bent toward worship, or did you have a bent towards doing things that were associated with church?
You know what? That's a good question. Because my parents were so open to what the Lord was doing in our lives, they never assumed that we were going to do the music of their era.
Yeah.
But that made me and Randy appreciate the hymns. We didn't have to be against the older music.
You weren't counter.
Right. And so songs like Great Is Thy Faithfulness, Holy, Holy, Holy are still so deep in my heart. I ended up arranging those in a more modern, context for the Vineyard, and did a Vineyard album, of hymns. But what I was going to say was Randy and I did a song called Turn, Turn, Turn on a Sunday night at church in Ohio. We were so young. And my dad, obviously my dad had to sanction it. And, it was a big hit on the radio at the time.
Yeah.
And my dad goes, well, of course, do that song. It's right out of Ecclesiastes. And so my mom and dad were always forward thinking. So we didn't have to go outside of the church to express.
Yeah. It's very interesting. I love hearing that story because I'm interested in this as well. If for no other reason, because I have my own children, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And I want them to feel free to have their own faith encounter, right. And I want them to stay in the church. So
sure.
My wife and I, we oftentimes talk about how to be flexible and open and give the kids room,
Absolutely.
That's good. I'm assuming, and you can correct me here, totally cool. I'm assuming this is also why your piano playing has a gospel feel to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're a church guy. Like you grew up in church. Is that some of where that's at?
It is. And my father was very, ecumenical. Okay. In fact, I'll just give you an example. On Sunday mornings for about 3 or 4 years in a row at our church in Arcadia here in California, we would start the service, because it started with a pastoral prayer right at the beginning, kind of the invocational prayer. Mm. He would have us all in the church pray for a different church in our city. And the other thing he would do is he would take us as the youth group, he would take us to other churches. I went to, a African-American church very young, and I was like, oh, what is this?
Yeah,
this
you got set on fire.
Amazing. Yeah. And also in the late 60s, there was the song that so many know is Oh Happy Day. Heard it on the radio. It was in heavy rotation. I had to learn that song. So that part of me, that
it hit you at just the right moment.
It did.
Yeah, and especially in African-American gospel churches, the piano player is everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, piano player and drummer, they're and the song leader, that's where the juice is.
It is.
That's great. Okay, so let's maybe jump up here just a little bit. How did you come into the Vineyard? How did you, you're in Southern California.
Right.
Yeah. Was it an accident? Did somebody invite you? What happened?
Again, it's you notice the stream here. It goes back to my parents. My father was, we were in a denomination that it wasn't, we loved, we so many relationships there.
Yes.
Never had to be against that denomination. But my dad knew there was more. And the Holy Spirit was touching my father in powerful ways. And we kept seeing our youth group, just kids changed. And we saw so much of the Spirit working in lives. And my dad says, well, this is what it's supposed to be like. And so we started looking for a home. So my father starts, we had some friends that knew of the Vineyard, knew of John Wimber up in Bakersfield of all places. And so I was the first one that got invited. Bakersfield had an extra conference ticket because somebody couldn't go. I went to, in 84, I went to a Vineyard conference. And
what kind of conference was it? Was
boy.
it like a healing conference?
No, it was actually for leaders. pastors, leaders thing. And I just, like the first 2 days, I was offended by the worship because it was just, I didn't know where to put it.
Yeah. Okay, so what was offensive about it?
Well, some of you who are listening will know who Eddie Espinoza is. So he's up leading worship. And at some point in the worship set, he couldn't sing anymore. God was just all over him. He put his guitar down and he got on his knees. He's crying. And I'm out there and I'm saying, you can't do that. You're a leader. The whole thing's going to fall apart. You cannot fall apart now. You have to do that somewhere else. Get up and lead us.
Wow. Yes.
3 days later, I'm on the floor.
Isn't this the classic Vineyard story?
It is. And I got to tell Eddie later, Eddie, he laughed and I said, Eddie, and he modeled that whole thing of authenticity, humility, and just he was in that place with God and he responded to God instead of,
And isn't that a kind of leadership though?
It is.
Isn't it?
That's what I learned.
It's the form of leadership that says doing what God is wanting or
absolutely
serving or ministering to God. That's the real heart or the real job of the leader. So not to keep the meeting together.
Absolutely. No, that's it. I had to be deconstructed, so to speak, and as I became a worship leader instead of a song leader a little later on. Now, the whole thing about our church coming into our church being adopted into the Vineyard, John started to meet my dad on Sunday nights, and a friend of ours, Randy and I, who was in our band, Smitty Price, had worked with John at Maranatha Music. Smitty was doing stuff over there with the gang, and so John Wimber already knew Smitty, and he says to him one day, "Does anybody in your church write songs?" And Smitty goes, "Well, as a matter of fact, there's these two brothers." And we'd been writing worship songs. We were already impacted by the Vineyard, like from 85, 86. We were listening to all those albums, Hosanna, You Are Here. And so John didn't make the connection that my dad, that our dad was connected to us. We send in songs and some buzz started happening about the songs, etc. He figured out, he made the connection, and my dad said the classic thing. John would say, stay in your denomination, stay in your denomination. And one night, my dad says to him on a Sunday night, John, you don't understand. This is our family. We are, and John finally released us. So
we found a home.
We found a home. We were grafted in 87 to the Vineyard.
Yeah. Okay. So at that point, you were like all the way in and you're leading worship?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. When did your songwriting change? Because you said, you made those 3 early albums and there was a worship song on there.
Each one. Yeah.
Yes. So the seed is in there.
Right.
But you're a songwriter. Your brother's a songwriter.
Right.
When did you guys really lean in, or I don't even know what the right language here, but when did you realize, we're going to write worship songs, or we are writing worship songs?
The thing is, when people say things to you, they confirm things about you. And somebody would say way back when in my life, young, very young teens and whatever, they'd say, God has given you a tender heart. When you're at the piano, when you lead us or whatever, and it would happen in the youth group, like kids would start crying and we're like, what's that about, right? And so it was more the affirmation that this is the direction you're going. We laid down the band that we were in. We'd had a wonderful experience. There was that interim time between like 82 and 86. We started being affected by what God was doing in the Vineyard and other places, and we couldn't help but write songs that were like that. What we had to learn to do, though, I'll tell you what it was, Adam, was we had to learn to write simpler.
Okay, like simpler chord arrangements?
Yes. Yep. We weren't like a progressive band, we'd call it prog band, but, Randy and I love the minor nines and the 11s and the, you sink your teeth into some stuff. And so we loved those simple songs. And then when we went to start writing them, God saying, write them, we realized like how much of a deal it is to write that simple, holy and anointed song with the memorable melody. But, the 11-year-old kid can play it at home. Yeah.
I mean, that really is my story, at least my own journey in worship. Mm-hmm. I kind of shared a little bit of this last night. I learned how to play guitar by playing Andy Park songs.
There you go.
I mean, you remember like the songbooks, and at the bottom there's the little chords, and and I'm trying to figure out how to make a G and then a C and an E minor. I mean, that's exactly how I learned, and thank God that the songs were were simple.
Absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely.
And if it hadn't been, I would have just been, thank God there was no 9s and 11s in there at that point. Yeah, that's great.
Absolutely. The thing about John Wimber was, those who know his history about, with jazz and with playing the sax and so many things, one of the things that was so funny for Randy and I was we led at a pastor's conference. I think this is 94. And, we got our band up there with us. And some of the band was from our previous band. Smitty Price is there and Bill Dragoo on drums. And we did one of John's songs. John comes up afterwards and he says, "Oh, it was so refreshing tonight. He goes, Randy, Terry, you guys know how to play it like how I wrote it, with those chords and with those."
Yeah.
And it was fun, but also to be able to strip things down and not impress. It's not to impress people.
Yeah.
It's like to see God come on something that you've written that God touched you with. And go, I don't care if other worship leaders ever play that song the way we play it or with that chord, because Randy and I were known for that chord in a song, you know, and it would be, whoop, little zing. But we just let go of all of that,
That's really beautiful. Let's talk about songwriting just for a second.
Sure.
How do songs happen for you? Where do they come from?
Yeah. Well, Andy Park called me the consummate inspirational writer. And what he meant by that is it's burst. Like I have written songs where the whole song just pours out in minutes.
Yes.
And then I had to learn how to stick with it and write some that didn't come that way. But so many of the songs, a song like Psalm 19, probably a half an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah. And some of those, and then others, of course, they took a little longer. But it was Andy that kind of spoke it into me. He said, Terry, don't worry that you don't have to work at it like, you say, did I work long enough on this song? And he goes like, it's done, it's complete. Yeah. And so our writers are different.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is you sit down at the piano and oftentimes something just kind of falls out fully formed.
Lyric and, that's interesting. I had to learn later, both Randy and I, like sometimes the lyric comes and then one of us was going to grab a hold of the melody or I'd show it. We wrote a song called Jude Doxology, and Randy was so good at, I showed him the song, but it was unsingable because there was no place to get air. Yeah. It's a 6/8 song and you hold a note and you can't go into the chorus. So Randy would come along and say, wait. And then he would adapt the song and make it congregational, and then he helped write the bridge. Yeah. So you know how that happens. Yeah. You write something and then somebody comes in and finishes it. But none of it was ever hard. It just
That's
flowed.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, and flowed. I'm hearing you reference your brother a lot. How often did you guys write together?
Early on, we like in our early Vineyard days, we wrote together constantly. And then he went up north to Seattle and planted churches. And so, I was he would write some up there and then I'd maybe finish them. But then he started having the Randy B songs and I started having the Terry B songs. Yeah. So.
Hey friends, Mike from Vineyard School of Worship. The Band Lab is happening March 5th through 7th in Minneapolis, Minnesota. This is an incredible event to train your whole team in about 48 hours. Drums, bass, sound, vocals, piano, guitar, keyboards. We're going to train everybody. It's going to be a 48-hour deep dive in the relational, spiritual, technical components, musicianship, Band Lab. Go to vsow.org. Use the code Ferment15 at checkout for 15% off. We'll see you at Band Lab in Minneapolis in March.
Terry, here's what I really wanted to talk with you about, is just something I've noticed about you that's really blessed me from afar. And as I've asked around, this is something that just kind of keeps coming up when I talk about you with other people. And it is this knack you have for keeping young people around you and for raising people up. Can we just talk about that for a second?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so you are in this worship thing. You have been in it for not just a minute.
Right.
We're talking about, you mentioned
Decades.
this morning in your talk about decades, right?
Yeah.
Okay, how have you kept young people around you?
You know, it's interesting. Part of it is inexplicable, and we all know that the mysterious thing about God and how He forms us. Let's go back to my mom and dad again, and it's just so many of those things go back to their legacy, which is we always had youth in our home. Like our kitchen at our house was just as important as the church. Like they were always inviting kids. They were always welcomed. And my mom and dad became like a mom and dad to them. So many of them fatherless or motherless. Doesn't mean that they didn't have a mom and dad at home. Yeah. But that generation, that's where that started, you know, so many. And so we just saw that. And that was the expected. We'd see a kid kneeling on the floor in the living room and giving their heart to Jesus. My mom holding some girl in her arms that just got beat up by, life, and it was constant. And so, and yet we had a wonderful family life too. The boundaries were there, but we loved it. Our friends could come over and mom and dad would say, set another plate. We'll make the food work, And so for us, that was just part of our, the legacy continued. And so like as soon as I was out of the high school youth, our youth group, as soon as I graduated, I was a counselor in the youth group. And I was already speaking into, kids' lives, and the music was obviously always involved in that. And then as worship became such a focal point for us, I've never known not to include. And the Lord just gave me this thing about identifying. I could see an 8-year-old. I still can. An 8-year-old, like there's something on them. Here's another story. I walked up to a kid years ago at our church, and he had drawn something that was, and it was really, I think it was pencil drawing, maybe paint. And I walked over to him and I just said, "You're an artist." Later on, he comes back to me a few years later. He says, "You have no idea what that sparked in me. Someone noticed me and called that out and appreciated what I did, affirmed it." That's how we are. My brother was the same, our family. And so I'm looking around, and as you speak into them and you listen to them and their story, and you let them share, like, "Oh yeah, I love to play the piano at home. I only know 6 chords," and you find out, about their life, and you see God on them. You just invite them in, and it's just been that kind of a road.
Well, part of what I hear in your story right here, Terry, is I hear it was modeled for you by your mother and father.
Yes.
And then I also hear this really beautiful thing about hospitality. Yeah. That your mom and dad were making room in your actual home. Yeah. Yeah. And I love what you said about people were in your kitchen and it was maybe as important as the church. Yeah, it was. I've just experienced that over and over in my own life. Like, how many times has God done something really, really wonderful with someone or with me around some food in the kitchen table?
There you go.
Yeah. I mean, some of Jesus' best work was around a table, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so you just sort of continued that on. Yeah. Yep. Okay, can we dig into this thing here where you just mentioned a moment ago, you will see something on like a young kid. Yeah. So are you looking for people, or you get surprised? You'll just be at church and you're sort of surprised?
It's both. The thing that people have asked me about our church because we've raised up so many worship leaders, and they've said, "Well, what is your audition process, or what is your process to identify?" And I'm like, "No, none of that. It's relational first." And it gets me emotional. I sat down with a young lady, one of our worship leaders, Zoe. She's
ridiculous, by the way. She's ridiculous. Such a great, just heart. I was blown away the other night.
And she's just sticky. They're attracted to her. She just can't help but bring strays in and bring people go. And so she tells me about this girl, this young, same age. She was 18 at the time, and she had been in a church where she started to join the worship team, but she got beat up in that situation. It was all this competition, worship wars. It was a mess, and she didn't want to have anything more to do with it. Zoe meets her at college, she comes to our church and she just falls in love with our atmosphere. And she finally, Zoe says, it's safe. And she says, that's what it is. I've never felt safe. And so we met on a winter morning and had coffee, and the Lord just gave me such compassion. And I looked right at her and I said, I'm not interested in you becoming a member of the worship team. That's secondary. I want you to feel the love of the Father. I want that hurt that happened, for God to take care of it, because there's music in you and the enemy would love to steal it. Where we are at the coffee shop, she's crying, and she knew, she said it to me later. She said, I knew you meant every word.
Oh, you're a PhD pastor, Terry. Goodness gracious. What a great moment.
It was.
Yeah, what a beautiful thing. And so you're just looking. You're looking for people. You're looking for maybe the gifts and the calling on them, and you're not afraid to share it.
Right.
That's part of what I hear as well.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. How do you make space for those people on your worship band? Let me just get real granular here. If you're making room for young people or new people, does that mean less room for other people sometimes? How do you work that out? Talk to me.
I hear you. We are a completely rotational church. Like, we don't have set bands at all. Mm-hmm. And so our what do you call them? Seasoned veterans. The culture in our church and our worship is so no drama zone. It's amazing. The gang, my age and on down, in our 30s, 40s, 50s, it's all about embracing. It's all about affirming. And so we bring them in slow. They'll lead a song on a Sunday as part of us. They don't lead the whole set, of course. Yeah. Then they co-lead. They lead 2 songs. All the way through, they're just getting loved on. And one of the things God really showed me was how the territorialism in churches is such a problem. And it can be in worship. Wait, I'm the star alto in this church. What do you mean you're bringing on this young? We just don't have any of it. It just isn't. So if somebody is on the worship team once a month, that's fine for them.
Yes.
And then they support and cheer on. And I'm not making, how they say, at our church, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And it's not reality. It is reality for us. And so we have like 6 right now, 6 in there, 6 of them under 20.
Amen. Amen. One of the things I've noticed over and over is some of our most underutilized people at church are in middle school and high school.
Absolutely.
And they have time, right?
They do.
They actually have time to learn instruments to learn parts. And if someone's looking for them, it could be a great asset.
But you just said it. They're looking for them.
Yeah. Well, this is something I've been trying to talk to people about, and we're even wanting to investigate this more at our own church. Sometimes drummers are hard to find.
Absolutely.
Sometimes, and if you could get a drummer, start training them in middle school, by the time they're freshmen, maybe they're pretty good. Guess what?
Yeah.
They're going to be with you for 4 years.
They are. And the other thing is, if you start that early, they start understanding the difference between like being in a band, which is fun, and being a worship drummer.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, you can work with it in a brand new way, and you don't have maybe bad muscle memory or habits that need to be reshaped. Yeah. Okay. I also know that with some of your young people that you raise up, you're not just raising them up to lead worship, but you're raising them up to write songs.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just talk to me about that.
Well, Zoe's an example of that, but she's not the only one. This is a fun story. She was at an Equip conference down at Anaheim, and it was running concurrently with the quote unquote adult conference, right? And so I know that Melissa Keller was part of it to some extent, but a couple people walk up and pray for Zoe one night. She's 16, and they said, "Zoe, do you write songs?" And she said, "Oh, not really." But basically they prayed it on. They said, "We see you writing songs." And she did journal and all that. Well, anyway, almost the same night that she was given that word, one of our pastors comes up to me at a Wednesday night service, and he says, "Terry, I know you've heard this so many times, but I have to deliver this message. You're not done writing songs." So I kind of go, "Okay, Lord, I've heard that a million times." But this staff member, he is so on with his prophetic words. Zoe's getting prayed for that night.
Yes.
That she's supposed to write.
Yes.
And so one of them says, go talk to Terry. So she approaches me a few days later, literally after I'd been prayed for. It's that story, right? She says, and of course, Zoe's already on the worship team. She joined the worship team at 13.
Yeah.
So we already have a relationship.
Yeah.
I said, sure, I'll help you with song. Let's see where this goes. So the first song that's actually on, we got recorded last year. The very first song, we sit down together and she hears the whole melody. She barely plays the keyboard, but she knew enough about the chord shape. Didn't know the chords for the chorus, but she had the melody. I sit down with her. It was effortless. The song was done in an hour. There was no bridge. We wrote the bridge together. The song's called Defenseless. She didn't know what to call the song. It's one of those songs where how did she know that at the bridge, that's the perfect place to drop that word in? We cried. We wrote and cried. Like we're just writing the song and crying, and we've co-written ever since. And
you guys made a record.
Yeah.
I just love this.
It's crazy.
It's beautiful because it's the way we keep this thing going. You know, I mean, yes, worship is always to God and for God. Always, that's the foundation of everything.
Sure.
And at the same time, it is about doing that Jesus work of discipling people, raising people up, giving them platforms, the things that you know, teaching someone else, the things that you have, giving to someone else. And I just love hearing this because...
Well, the Zoe story is interesting. There's another story that's concurrent with it. So, all that happens with her, and we get ready to start recording. And I'd asked Casey Coram to produce with us and help us out. So, and he loves doing all that stuff. So, and he lives nearby. So anyway, he meets Zoe, and he sees what I see, affirms it. Anyway, so we're picking songs. And here's the thing that Lord spoke to me. He said, Terry, here's what he said. You're done writing songs when I say you're done. Because I had such an incredible era. I'm thinking, Lord, if I never write a song. But then he says, well, Terry, you've been a trainer and a father in worship. Why wouldn't I have you father songwriting?
That's right.
It's like Clueless. It's like I could have had a V8, right? And so anyway, I'd written some lyrics in 2015. And the first part of that song is, the first lyrical part is, I'll get it right, pure and profane. And I'm driving around Claremont, my city, and I'm seeing people, and the Lord is saying to me, I love the pure. I love the ones that you think are profane or too dirty, that can't come into my family, in my house. So I write this down. I think it's lyric. It sits there in my phone, and then my nephew is a worship leader.
Yes.
And he's way out he's out in Kentucky.
Yeah.
And so I here's how the Zoe connection. I tell him what's going on at our church, and he knows I've raised up for years. In fact, my brother and I affected him and his brother, in worship, etc. And so he loves Defenseless. He loves that song. He goes, that's crazy. Like, she's like, what the heck? And then he says to me, Terry, we've talked about songwriting forever, that, my uncle and I were going to write a song, and I said, I'll send you something. I go through my phone in the notes. I send him all the same. That was the title thing. An hour and a half later, he sends it back with the complete melody. We didn't change a thing.
Amen.
And so it was like God saying, you're going to co-write to train up. You're going to do everything you do, Terry.
Sure.
Give it all away.
Yeah. Well, I'll just tell you one story about All the Same.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we're in California right now.
Right.
This is the very end of the SoCal Worship Leaders Retreat. The week before, Melissa and I were in New York, and we did the same thing. We had another Worship Leaders Retreat.
Yeah.
Really beautiful. On the last morning, during the communion set, they played All the Same.
Oh, my.
And when we hit the bridge, you welcome the lover, the hater.
Yep.
The room came apart.
Wow.
It was so beautiful. Yeah, what a song. And to get to share that with someone younger and then someone who's your family.
Absolutely.
There's layers
oh,
there.
My gosh.
There's layers there for me.
Oh, yeah.
Amen.
Yeah, it was
Amen.
so powerful.
So good. Okay, so I just want to kind of review, just because people are listening, and I want to maybe highlight some things that I'm hearing in your story that are important, especially for raising people up. I'm hearing make room in your home.
Yes.
Which is really maybe a metaphor for make room in your life.
I was just going to say, in your heart and your life.
Yes. So make room in your home.
Yeah.
Make room around your table.
Yes.
Yes. To look for young people. So I'm trying to just highlight this maybe for worship leaders who are out there and pastors and whatnot. Look for young people. You look for their gifts and you speak it out.
Yes.
When you see it.
I call it out.
Yeah. And then I'm hearing you also looking for ways to share the things that you already know how to do with other people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And let them, I would say this to you guys who are listening. It's going to be bad. Like, one of our worship leaders, he's 60, he'll be 17 next week.
Yeah.
I started working with him at 13. I didn't know if he was ever going to play a B chord on a guitar. It was horrible.
Yes.
His rhythm was bad. His voice, he was in puberty, right? His voice is all over it. He led worship last Sunday, and the church is just bawling. God is all over him. Yeah. The Lord wouldn't let me stop. He was one of the ones where I went, Lord, am I hearing you?
Yes.
But the kid has got discernment and wisdom on him. He says things over people that I like at that age. So the point being, for these worship leaders who are going, I've never been able to identify anybody, or I just don't know how to do that. You got to take the risk. And along the way, you don't tell them that they're going to be this and this and this. You just walk the journey with them.
Yeah, you just keep with them where they're at.
Yes.
And what I hear in this story also is be patient.
Absolutely.
Yeah, maybe it takes 3 or 4 years.
It does.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love this. Really, really helpful. Dude, here's what I want to do, Terry.
Yep.
Last question. We have a new question for the end of the podcast this year. Yeah.
I'm scared already.
Yeah, that's right. You got to be scared. No, here's our takeaway question. Can you tell me what your dream is now?
Yeah.
What's the dream of your heart right now?
Let me rewind.
Yeah.
So for 2018 Easter, I was on a sabbatical in February. A strange time to do that, but I was on a sabbatical, and God gave me these lyrics to a song, again, we recorded last year, and it's called God You Reign. I sent it to Zoe. She hears the melody. It's an anthemic kind of a song. It's one of those, choral things. One of the dreams that had been in my heart was to write a worship song and have a choir sing on that song.
Yeah, like a real choir.
The real choir.
Yeah.
So I know I need to say it fast, but here's the deal. I have friends, in California, I have friends in different places. Lake Avenue Church in Pasadena has this incredible choir. And the church does everything from the latest Phil Wickham song to, All Hail the Power of Jesus' Name. I get a hold of him. I said, we have this song. I said, it's always been my dream. I find out he knows much more about me than I thought, and I know much more about him. That 6 degrees of separation. He says, well, show me the song. We recorded it in October of last year. It was the last thing to go on the record. 100+ voices in their incredible auditorium. Zoe and I are sitting on the stage. He invites us on the stage. My mom is out in the audience. There's nobody except my mom and another friend. And my mom goes, I can't believe I got to see this. I am bawling. Here's God saying, yeah, Terry, that's been in your heart for years. I want to do it for you.
Yeah.
And here's this 17-year-old worship leader going, how did I get here, But we shared that moment, some at her age. So God was saying, Terry, here you are, the father, fathering her. And she calls me, and her dad, who's a pastor, says, Terry, you're her spiritual father.
Yeah.
Oh, that's humbling. Yeah. Here she is enjoying that. My future dream is, well, first of all, continuing to do what I do, to raise up as many, and to watch the ones I've raised up mentor, to have grandchildren.
Yes.
And I already have a few, but more and more. Yeah. The other one is to someday, let's bring it back to Randy. Yeah. Randy and Terry are leading worship, some of the newest songs in the Vineyard or whatever, and also our oldies with an orchestra.
With an orchestra. Dude. Come on.
He did the choir. Why not the orchestra?
Yeah, and you told me a story off mic before we pressed play about how you've been praying for a cabin in the 90s.
Yeah.
God just takes care of you, doesn't he?
He just goes. and I don't have to pay for it.
Yeah.
If somebody else is, and I drop in.
All right, listen. You hear that, Jesus? We need an orchestral symphony.
Amen.
Let's do it.
Amen.
Hey, Terry, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Oh, it was a delight.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. All right, everybody. Peace.
Hey everyone, Casey Coram here, producer of the Ferment podcast. Thanks for listening. I just wanted to remind you about our Sing Together conference in Nashville, Tennessee from March 26th through 28th. It's going to be a great time and we hope to see you there. For more information, go to vineyardworship.com. All right, people, see you next time. Peace.